All right, let's do this. Welcome to 116. Congratulations on making it through 115. Let's go on to the next thing. Ooh. All right, so I have a spam call. Should I answer it? So quickly, I'm Jesse Hartloff. I don't have much to say about myself that you'll care about, I guess. I don't know. But I just want to briefly introduce myself. I'm Jesse Hartloff. I just go by Jesse. We can keep it casual. We don't need to add formalities. Just call me Jesse. Just stick with that. If you prefer more formality, some students do. That's perfectly fine. Dr. Hartloff, Professor, whatever. It all works. But Jesse's fine. Just Jesse's fine. All right. So now 116. So first, the course website. This is important, and I got this as simple as I possibly can. The course website is CSE116.com. CSE116.com, this is everything you need to know for the course, and I shouldn't have any of you asking me what the course website is. I've thought about it for a while, and I don't know how to make it any simpler. CSE116.com. Unless you forget what course you're enrolled in, at that point you got bigger problems. So, CSE116.com is where everything is that you'll need for the course. So, let's just go through this. The grading structure for this course, we'll get to all the details, but it is fairly complicated. So for better or worse, it will take all day just to go through this syllabus, but we'll get all your questions out there, get them answered, and on Wednesday we can start rolling with the course. So let's go through this. We're going to use AutoLab for submissions to submit your programming assignments. You've used this in 115, but anyone who's a transfer student, or if you transferred in credit for 115 or the AP exam or whatever it is, and you didn't take 115 here, AutoLab is our tool to automatically grade your programming submissions. You're going to submit all of the programming assignments on AutoLab, and this is also where I'll give feedback on non-programming assignments. This is where that feedback will be posted. Your grades for quizzes and interviews, which we'll talk about, they'll all be posted on AutoLab. For programming submissions, you can submit as many times as you want to AutoLab. It'll automatically grade your code, give you feedback and your score, so there are no questions on whether you're earning credit for something or not. As soon as AutoLab says you're done with this programming task, you're done with that programming task. If AutoLab doesn't say you're done, you're not done. But you can submit as many times as you like before the deadline. I recommend not doing that and thoroughly testing your code and making sure it doesn't. But if you're not going to follow that advice and you want to submit hundreds of times like some students do, not stopping you. Go for it. That won't be true in later classes, but in this class, it's still early enough that we're going to allow that. All the code examples that I show in lecture slides are going to be posted in this repo. So whenever you see an example in my slides, you'll be able to find it in this repo as well, hosted on GitHub. I recommend you clone this into your IntelliJ and play with the examples here. If you don't know what half of those words I just said mean, don't worry about it. We'll get to it all. We'll get everything set up. Git, GitHub, IntelliJ, repository. Those might all be new words for you. So we'll talk about what all those are. Not today, but we'll talk about what all those are. But all the code is going to be in there. And there are other sections of this course. There are 5 sections total. Sections A, B, and C I'm teaching, and sections D and E are going to be taught by Paul. He also just goes by first name, but Professor Dr. Dixon, if you want more formality. He's teaching D and E. He does a lot more live coding than I will do. So the coding that they do in sections D and E, they're right there. If you're interested, you can poke around and see what he's doing in those sections. If you're not interested, it's whatever. But those links are there because we use one website for all 5 sections. The lectures for all 5 sections are going to be recorded and posted to UB Learns. The first 3 lectures are probably there already for both of Paul's sections and my section that I just did. All 5 videos are going to be there. So if for whatever reason, I'm explaining something and the way I explain it, it just doesn't gel with you. You just aren't feeling the way I explain things, go check out Paul's videos. We do have very different and complementary teaching styles, which I think is great for a course like this where you have both sections going simultaneously. I say both, but all 5 sections. That if my style just doesn't work for you, go check out Paul's. He does a lot more live coding than I do, and I'll do a lot more slides and concepts than he does. So if one doesn't work for you, check out the other. As long as one of us works for you, hopefully at least one of our styles works for you. And then you can learn that way, learn from whichever one of us makes most sense to you. My 3 sections are this one at 2 p.m. in this room, 1 p.m. also in this room, and 3 p.m. also in this room. I'm in this room for 3 hours straight, and this is the middle of my 3-hour block. With it, to an extent, I don't care which of my 3 lectures you go to. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Paul, see if he's comfortable with jumping across professors. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I don't know. Well, I'll talk to him. But at least across my 3 lectures, I don't care which one you go to. I'm in this room for 3 hours straight, regardless. I actually teach 312 right after that, so I'm in this room for 4 hours regardless. But I don't care which one you go to, so if another one works better for your schedule, it's no sweat off my back for you to just go to a different one. If it works better for you, go to one of the other 2. The only caveat to that, the only way that I wouldn't allow that is if one of the lectures becomes very popular and we don't have enough seats for everybody. At that point, I'll say I'm prioritizing everybody enrolled in that section, and then I might have to stop the insanity. Barring something like that, I don't care which section you go to. We're going to have something called lecture questions that I'll introduce in like 40 minutes probably, but it takes a while to get there. But lecture questions, you answer a question during each lecture. I don't care which lecture you attend and answer that question, and as long as you answer it that day, I think that's obvious though. As long as you only answer it once though. You only get one shot at each of those questions, so once you submit, that's it. So if you submit in the 1 p.m. lecture and you're enrolled in this lecture, you can't go to 2 p.m. and say, well, this is my actual lecture, I get another chance, right? None of that. You can go to another lecture, but you only get one shot at that lecture question still. Memory diagrams is something that probably doesn't mean anything to you right now, but it will. Starting Wednesday, we're going to see our first memory diagram. We're going to hit you with that soon. Everything related to memory diagrams will be in this reference. It has to be updated right now. It's an old reference at this point, which I guess brings up the point right now. Some of you may have heard, but if not, you're going to hear right now. The course is switching from Scala to Java this semester. This will be a Java course this semester. So right now the reference is in Scala still. We have to update it to Java. But we will be covering Java this semester for a lot of reasons. Some other time I can talk to you about why we switch. Java this semester. If you want to watch past lectures, again, they'll all be in Scala. But if you want to watch past lectures from previous semesters, I have like my last 2 or 3 years of lectures on YouTube. They'll be in Scala for 116, so it's not as helpful, but the concepts will be the same. For this semester, I already mentioned this, right? On UB Learns, you'll find this semester's videos. That's the only thing we'll use UB Learns for, at least at the moment. We're considering using it for labs. We'll see how that goes in the future. But right now, the only thing on there will be the lecture videos. I did mention that because I'm like the other 3 videos are probably on there. Piazza, I assume you're familiar with Piazza. If not, it's a question and answer site. There's 2 posts on there right now. Of course, there might be more at this point. But 2 posts since I checked. One is the office hour post. This link will take you right to the office hours post. That's where you can find the office hour schedule. Office hours do start this week. If a TA or mine or Paul's name is on that schedule, we'll be there. If a TA is ever not there, let me know. Tell on them. I want to get them in trouble. So I want to go yell at them. Anyway, it's one of the things that irritates me when a student says, oh, I went to office hours and the TA wasn't there, but their name's on the schedule. It bugs the crap out of me. They need to be there if they say they're going to be there. But nobody wants to rat on the TAs, so it's hard for me to find out when that happens. But be a rat. Come on, do it. It's fun. Anyway, go there to ask questions. The second post is a guide of how to ask questions on Piazza. Please read that guide before you post a question on Piazza. I always have students who post questions on Piazza, which are very poor quality questions. It's usually a screenshot of their code that says, AutoLab doesn't give me points for this. Fix it. Help me. And they give no context to the issues that they have. Follow that post, like give us some context. I tried this didn't work. I saw this error message. This is what's going on. This is what I tested. Give us some information and you'll be able to get a better answer. If you don't give us any information, here's a screenshot of my code, fix it. If you're that student, just please don't get mad if we completely ignore your question. Other students say, I posted on Piazza, it's been a week and nobody answered. I go check the post and it's literally screenshot, fix it. This doesn't work. What am I doing wrong? If you're so lost that you can't even ask a question, that's perfectly fine. Just go to office hours, though, for that. That's where we can have a dialogue and we can help you out and figure out where you exactly need help and guide you along like that. It's very hard to do over Piazza because we got to post a follow-up that says, what did you try? What are you seeing? Either that or just straight up give you the answer, and we're not going to do that. And the last one, Discord to chat with students, as it says. This is a more informal environment if you just want to chat and BS and whatever you'll do. I've been using this same Discord server for a few years, ever since the COVID days, and I use the same server for all my courses. So that means there's a lot of students there. There's a lot of seniors, juniors, alumni, a lot of TAs. There's a lot of people in there that would be happy to answer your questions, for example, if you have any. So if you want to go in there and say, like, hey, this 116, it seems really crazy. Is it really as bad as it sounds from the syllabus that we'll go over today? There'll be tons of people there to give you advice, help you out. If you want to ask about the CSE curriculum, overall careers in CSE, what 220 and 250 are going to be like. There's tons of people there. Use that as a resource and pick their brains. They'd be happy. So many of them would be very happy to help you out, give you advice. There will be TAs in there, including current TAs in there. I have to give this disclaimer every semester because students have gotten mad in the past, so I want to make sure I say this. When the TAs are in Discord, they are not acting as TAs. They will have a TA role in Discord, so you'll know that they're TAs, but they're not there to be TAs, if that makes sense. For example, if you ask them a coding question, you say, hey, I'm having trouble with my homework, they can act however they're going to act. They're acting as themselves, not as TAs. So they can respond however they want to respond. That might be unprofessional, it might be crude, they're just going to act as a human being. Don't get mad at them. I tell them that they can do that. They're acting as themselves on Discord. So just don't ask them coding questions. I recommend that, especially if you DM a TA a coding question, I recommend to them that they flat out ignore you. Just go to Piazza for that. Go to office hours for that. There are places for that. Discord isn't the place. Discord is the more casual place to hang out and chat. Now, if you want to talk about like higher level stuff of the course, not specific problems about your code, by all means, post there. Post publicly, hey man, wait, what the hell's inheritance? That's perfectly fine. But posting, hey, I'm having trouble with this homework assignment, help me, especially if you're DMing a TA. It happens every semester, so I have to mention this, but, and they want to say, hey, piss off, that's perfectly within their rights. Because they're not acting as TAs, so I can't tell them what to do, and I have no intention to. The one official thing that I will use Discord for, the one exception to that, is there is a lecture channel into the Discord server. So when we were in the COVID days, I streamed on Twitch, and I liked having Twitch chat there. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot more interaction during the COVID semesters than I did in live semesters because students could just post in chat, and they're more likely to post in chat than raise their hands. I like to get that in our live lectures. So the Discord lecture channel, I'll have it open on my phone during lectures. So if you see me looking at my phone, I'm not ignoring you all. I'm looking at the chat and seeing what people are asking. So if you don't want to raise your hand, which I get it, I was that student, I never wanted to raise my hand during lecture. Everybody looks at you and then you're worried you're going to say something dumb. Oh, it's the worst. If you want to raise your hand, by all means, you can still do that. I'll answer you, we'll have a conversation. But if you don't, just post in the lecture channel. I'll be watching it. I'm hoping in every lecture we'll have TAs. We do have a TA here today. And the TAs will be watching the Discord chat to be able to answer any questions that I can't get to. Sometimes I have, like today, I have a lot of information in my head that I have to make sure I say. I'll try to watch as much as I can, but also the TAs will be able to answer the quick questions. Then the TAs can flag me down if there's a tougher question that I need to address. So I'll be in there. If you have any questions during lecture or comments or whatever, post it in there. If you want to talk during lecture in the channel, but it's completely unrelated to CSE 116, there's also a lecture off-topic channel. If you just want to bullshit about video games or whatever with your classmates, just go over to that channel, because it gets distracting sometimes when I'm trying to keep an eye on chat and go through content. So if the conversation is way off base in lecture, I tend to ignore it. So go to lecture off channel so I don't start ignoring lecture. Some lectures use it more than others. Some sections don't use it at all. If none of y'all want to use that, that's perfectly fine. But I'll have it open on my phone and I'll be watching it during each lecture regardless. Just to wrap it back around. So that's my way of getting Twitch chat in the classroom, the live things. All right, all we got through were the links at the top, but any questions on this so far? Need a minute to take a breath. If you get the lecture question wrong, no, you do not get credit for that. You have to get them right. But the lecture questions, they're easy. If you pay attention at all, our goal, I should say, is if you pay attention at all during lecture, you should get the lecture question right. Most of the correct answers are jokes. Like literal jokes. Paul writes them, so if you don't think they're funny, it's his fault. If you do think they're funny, I told him to write it. But they're made to be pretty easy. So don't stress about getting them right or wrong. But no, you don't get partial credit if you get the question wrong. You have to get them right. Oh yeah, it was answered already. Yeah, they're usually pretty simple, so don't worry. Yeah, none of them are meant to be. We're not trying to test you or quiz you or anything during those. It's, were you here and awake? Was pretty much the questions. Okay, let's get into the actual course itself. So in 115, I haven't taught it in a while, but whenever I taught 115, something I'd like to say when I taught it is the things that we teach you in 115, that's everything you need to know to program anything. You can program anything with what you learn in 115. You got variables, functions, loops, data structures, file I/O. I try not to step on this, but I keep stepping on it. I'll learn by the end of the semester. With those topics, you can do anything. You can code anything. You can get a computer to do anything that you can imagine. But you're going to have a tough time when the programs get larger. So in 116, we have a couple of foci. This sounds weird. Is how our programs work, not just writing things and making sure that it does the right thing, but focusing on how the computer actually takes your code and gets stuff done. And also, how do we write large programs? Like, you can do anything with what you have from 115, but once you get a pretty large program, a decently sized program, even just a couple hundred lines of code, much less thousands, it's going to be harder to keep it organized and make sure that it's right. If you've ever used pretty much any software ever, software has bugs. This is a very hard thing to do. Even professional software from major corporations still have bugs in them. Very, very hard to do, but we're going to do the best we can. We're going to at least give you that foundation of how to approach writing a large piece of software. To that end, we're going to learn unit testing. We're just going to test our code and make sure we have at least don't have the bugs that we thought of and wrote tests for, which hopefully are comprehensive, or at least close to. Classes in OOP, which gives us a good way to organize our code at a file level. It sounds weird, but without getting into the details too much, it's roughly what it is. And data structures and algorithms. You know 2 data structures right now. You have your basic sequential array-like data structure. In Python, this was list. In JavaScript, this was array. And you have a key value pair. In Python, this was a dictionary. In JavaScript, that was an object. So you have 2 data structures right now. We're going to expand that to 5. We're going to add linked lists, trees, and graphs to that list. and algorithms of how to work with those. So that's at a very, very high level what we're going to learn. And I do expect you to work hard. This is not an easy course. If you've heard anything about 116, it's probably that it's hard. I maintain that it's not overly difficult. It is time consuming. And I always feel weird saying this because I know most of you will just ignore this. But I got to say it anyway. Or I should say the students who really need to hear this will ignore it. Or probably aren't even in the room. But I expect you to invest a minimum of 12 hours per week in CSE 116. Now 5 of that is already scheduled. You have 3 hours of lecture, 2 hours of lab. So 5 hours, just show up to the things you need to show up for. That's 12 of those expected hours. And then at least 7 hours outside of class and lab, which is some studying, but mostly doing your programming, studying while you're programming, I suppose. Working on the programming tasks for the course. Now this is an average, and it assumes that you're up to speed on everything you need to know for each week of content. So if there's a week of content where you kind of spaced out, maybe you were sick, maybe you have a legitimate reason, but the following week, once you come back to 116 and put your time in, if you didn't put in those 7 hours, or if, I know none of you will do this, but if you skip lectures or anything, you're going to have to work harder in a following week. That will catch up to you. So when I hear students say, oh man, I put 40 plus hours into just 116 this week, my immediate knee-jerk response is always, how many hours did you put in the past couple of weeks? And it's usually like less than 5. So that will catch up to you. You can't just slack off for a bit and then put in 12 hours per week and expect to succeed. It's not going to work like that. You have to catch up on everything that you didn't put in earlier. That includes 115 content. So if you're not completely up to date on 115 content, you are already behind. Now don't worry, you can get caught up. It's just going to take more than 12 hours per week for these first few weeks. So if you didn't fully understand all of the 115 content and you didn't study that content over break, you need to catch up. You need to study that content. Now, there are a few exceptions to this. I'm not going to rely on some of the 115 content. The web content, not going to use that here. Security content, the SQL content, the database stuff, we're not going to use any of that, so you're off the hook on that. But modules 1 and 2, if you're not great at all of that content, your variables, loops, functions, data structures, conditionals, if you're not completely up to speed on that, you're behind. I'm going to assume that you know all of those concepts, and then I'm going to jump into how to apply those concepts to Java. And we're going to go through modules 1 and 2 in, I think, 3 lectures these days. So we spend a little time. We used to do it in 2 lectures, but 3 lectures, we're going to go through everything you need in, bless you, everything you should know from 115, but in Java. It's going to go very, very fast. You spent more than half a semester learning that material in 115. So I expect you to know all the concepts, and I'm just going to say this is how you do it in Java, and that's it. And then show you memory diagrams. So you need to be up to speed on that content, or else you're spending more than 12 hours these first couple of weeks. And about midway through the semester, file I/O is going to come back to. So modules 1 and 2 for now, and then later in the semester, that one topic for module 3, assuming they have the same breakdown. I haven't looked at the 115 content in a while. If they have the same breakdown of 4 modules, file I/O was always in module 3 when I taught it. So that one topic. But other than that, modules 1 and 2 will be the important ones. If you're not completely up to speed on that, get up to speed on all those concepts. Oh, I lost it again. I got this thought that's like, you have to say this, and I keep losing it. Oh, yeah. I knew it was important. It was worth waiting to remember. So Professor Hertz, Dr. Hertz, I don't know if he goes just by Matt, if he goes with the less formality. Anyway, he's ran the data on this, and the data shows, I feel weird saying that, but the data does show anyone who gets less than a B plus in 115 has a significantly higher failure rate in 116. So if you just squeak by 115, especially if you're in like the C range, but even if you're in the B range of 115, you gotta work harder. You gotta work harder to get caught up. I don't know what you'll do with that information, but the failure rate is significantly higher. B plus and higher, the B plus, the A minus A range, those students typically do well. If you want numbers, it's about a 20% failure rate for that range and a 50% failure rate for below a B plus. So a lot of students do end up failing 116. That's just an unfortunate fact. But there's a strong correlation between how well you did in 115 and 116 versus success in 116. So I spent a lot of time talking about this day one. And we have resources. If you're not up to speed on all the 115 content, get up to speed. Get up to that B plus A student range. Even if that's not what's on your transcript, get up there in your knowledge, and then you can do well in 116. All right, I won't go through those links, but there's good content there. All right, any questions at this point? That's the same. Oh, this is going to be a lecture that doesn't use the lecture channel, isn't it? The last lecture was popping in there, but not this one. All right. So nobody has any questions? We can do that. All right. I guess I haven't really said anything yet either. It's just been work hard. So let's get into the actual course and how you're assessed. So the assessment in this course I mentioned is very different than any other course. So let's get into it. We're going to spend the rest of the 25 minutes talking about this. So the assessment in the course, your grading is split into learning objectives and application objectives. Application objectives we'll set to the side. We'll talk about those in a bit. Just suffice that they do exist. But learning objectives, let's talk about these first. You need to complete every learning objective of this course in order to pass. Every single one of them. And these are broken down into several categories. And then categories are broken down into several assessments that you'll have to pass in order to pass the class. The reason for this is to get into 220 and 250, and not to get into, but to do well in 220, 250, you need to know all of the content of this course. Every piece of content in this course is relied upon by either 220 or 250, some of it both. So if there's a topic that you've missed, if there's one of these learning objectives that you just can't do by the time you get to the end, we get to the end of the semester, like you wouldn't do well, or you would struggle a lot more in 220 and or 250. So if you do get away without knowing one of these and going into those courses, you typically do very poorly next semester, and I don't want to set you up for failure next semester. There are a lot of courses where there's a typical percentage-based assessment, and you can do poorly on one assignment and just be like, well, I took a hit on my grade, but I'll just go on to the next topic. And that entire topic, you just might not ever understand. And then you get into the next semester where they expect you to know it, and it doesn't work very well. For example, graphs, we'll learn about graphs towards the end of the semester. Well, 250, they're just going to assume you know what graphs are and how to use them. They might do a little bit of review to quickly refresh your memory, but they're going to assume you know how graphs work. So if I let you go into that course without knowing how graphs work, you're just set up for failure, and I don't want to do that to you. So all of these have to be completed. They're broken down into two categories, classes or object-oriented programming. And you'll be assessed in 4 different ways. There will be a quiz to see if you can read code and trace through it, an interview, seeing if you can explain the concepts, testing, writing unit testing to test your code, and write. Testing and write, the ones you'll probably spend the bulk of your time on is writing code, actually programming using the concepts. These sentences here are what you're going to be assessed on, and this is law. This is what you'll be assessed on. Anything that's not in these sentences, not going to be assessed on. We're not going to ask you to do it. So for reading OOP code, trace through the execution of programs that use classes, inheritance, and polymorphism being the 3 major topics of that, and trace through stack and heap memory through memory diagrams. That's what we're going to ask you to do to complete that learning objective. So there's not going to be anything out of nowhere where it's like, wait, you're also testing the state pattern? What the hell? We are teaching you the state pattern later this semester, but it's not here, so you're not assessed on it for a learning objective. Don't worry, it'll be an application objective, we'll get to it. But it won't be a learning objective of the course, so it won't be something you have to do to pass the class. Data structures and algorithms, the 3 topics being linked lists, trees, and graphs. So we got 6 topics, and how we're going to test you on these is through 6 lab quizzes. These are all labeled on the course schedule, which is, if you scroll down, you'll find the course schedule. 6 lab quizzes, and they're related to those 6 topics that we saw. So classes, or OOP, classes, inheritance, polymorphism, data structures, linked lists, trees, and graphs are the 6 topics that were in the sentences above. When there's a first chance lab quiz, it'll say lab quiz and interview. Interviews and quizzes will be in the same week. You'll go to lab, your TAs are going to throw a quiz at you, and that quiz will have some code on it, and you'll have to trace through the memory diagram for that code, which is effectively, how does the computer read this code? That's what you need to show to us. Do you understand how a computer is going to read that code? These quizzes are assessed on a pass-fail basis, and they're assessed, and in general, there is some subjective grading in this, for better or worse. There kind of has to be. But the general rule of thumb is if you didn't make any major mistakes, any fundamental mistakes that shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what's going on, then it would be a fail for the quiz. If you didn't make any major mistakes, major fundamental mistakes, you'll get a pass for the quiz. You need to pass all 6 quizzes to pass the class. You have to complete all 6 of these. If you don't pass the quiz on the first chance lab, each quiz will show up in the schedule 3 times, and you can see exactly which weeks these are all going to occur. They're in the schedule 3 times. The week after the first chance is second chance. If you fail it the first time, we're committed to grading the quizzes in a timely fashion and the interviews. So you have time to know, at least a few days before your next lab, so you know whether you have to go there and take the second chance, and getting some feedback to know what to study for this. The second chance is exactly what the name implies. It's a second chance to complete that quiz. If you complete it, either the first or second chance, they're exactly the same. They'll be different quizzes, but they're treated exactly the same for your grade. You either passed it or you didn't. Passing it twice doesn't help you at all. You just got to pass it once, either of those 2 times. While you're taking the quizzes, the TA is going to pull you away for an interview. I have 10 minutes written here, but we've shortened these interviews. I think they'll be closer to 5 minutes this semester, 5 or less even. But while you're taking the quiz, the TA is going to call your name. You're going to come up, do a quick interview with the TA, where they're going to ask you questions about the topic being covered. So, for example, if it's polymorphism, they'll say, describe polymorphism. What is polymorphism? Can we store values of different types in the same data structure? How would we do that? How do you set that up? How does polymorphism relate to inheritance? They're going to ask you questions like that, and this is another pass-fail. You either pass it or you don't, and you have to pass all 6 interviews to pass the class. Again, fail an interview, just show up next week. It'll be the second chance interview. If you say you passed the interview but you failed the quiz, you show up the next week and only retake the quiz. You already passed the interview, you already got credit for it, no reason to take it again. These interviews are important. Just a few reasons I want to highlight why these interviews is this is a very important skill out there in industry. Once you start working with teams, which is every single job you'll get writing software, every job is working on a team these days. Software is just that large these days. You have to be working on a team. You'll be communicating. Communication is a huge part of the job. You can sit there in a closet by yourself and write the best code anyone's ever seen in the world, but if you can't talk about that code to somebody else, it might be just worthless. Your company might just throw it away and fire you if you can't communicate about that code to somebody else. So we want you to get practice talking about these technical concepts with other human beings. It's a very, very important skill out there. Without this skill, you're not that very valuable of an employee. And this is a skill, we don't like doing this in computer science. We don't like talking to people. So this is an important way to get you practice with that, talking at a technical level with someone else. And the other reason is you're going to have, at some point in your career, I hope at least, you're going to have a high-pressure interview situation where there's a job on the line. You're going to have to interview with somebody where they decide, pass, fail, you either get a job offer or you don't. That's stressful. It's very stressful. When you go for your first job interview, I don't want it to be the first interview you've ever had. If you pass all these on the first try, it's a minimum of 6 interviews that you've already gone through. Granted, this is way lower stakes than a job interview. For one, you don't get a second chance for a job interview. But the topics, you'll know what TA is going to ask, et cetera. Anyway, way less stakes than a job interview. But when you go for that first job interview, I want you to at least be fairly comfortable. Like, I've gone through this. I sat across from a TA who was drilling me on technical questions. I got this. I want you to walk into the interview with confidence and get that job offer, get that internship, whatever it may be you're interviewing for. So you're going to get some practice with that in this class. And finally, the programming tests. There are 9 tests split into the 3 categories. This is where testing comes back. 3 of these are writing tests and testing code. 3 of them are OOP, and 3 of them are data structures. So 9 programming tests. These will be weekly assignments. First one's due week 3. I misspoke a little bit. The first expected deadline is week 3, which I'm about to introduce what expected deadlines are. So each of these programming tests have 2 deadlines. One is the expected deadline. This is going to be the Wednesday morning after the content has been introduced, after the week of the content being introduced. So the first task covers week 2 content. It kind of covers implicitly week 1 content also, but it's the week 2 programming task. It's due the Wednesday morning of week 3 is the expected deadline. As the name implies, this is where Paul and I expect everybody to be able to complete the assignment by. That's the expectation. You should be able to complete the assignment by that time. If this were a typical percentage-based grading course, and like homework is 60% of your grade or whatever, that would be the deadline, period. Like, that's the deadline. And if you don't get it by that deadline, you would just lose points. We don't have a percentage-based grading. You have to complete all 9 of these programming assignments before the deadline, or you fail the course, even if you just miss one of them. That's harsh, that's strict. So we give you effectively an automatic 1-week extension. The actual deadline is 1 week after that expected deadline. So you automatically have 1 extra week to complete the assignment before it's actually due. The other lecture was panicking at this point. I expect a lot of you to be panicking. So I want to talk about this next thing. This one is a dead lecture? I don't know what you mean by that. Yeah, Jack, I'll get to that in a bit. I'll answer that. The short answer is yes, though. So the grading is, at least on the surface, extremely harsh. You got 6 quizzes, 6 interviews, 9 programming tests. You need to complete every single one of those things, or else you fail the class. That's harsh. To lighten that up a bit, we have what's called recovery opportunities. So far you have 2 opportunities to complete any learning objective, anything pertaining to a learning objective. You got 2, the first chance, second chance for quiz and interview, and the automatic 1-week extension beyond the expected deadline for the programming tasks. So you get 2 opportunities for every single learning objective that you need to do to pass the course. If you need a 3rd opportunity, you have a total of 4 recovery opportunities that you can use. You can use these on any interview, any quiz, any programming task, and you'll get a 3rd opportunity. For the interviews and quizzes, these are already built into the lab schedule. The week after the second chance lab is going to be labeled a recovery is already labeled as a recovery opportunity lab in the course schedule. So if you didn't pass the first 2, say on an interview, you didn't pass the first 2, show up to that 3rd one, show up to the recovery opportunity one, and you get your 3rd chance in that interview. If you didn't complete a programming task by the actual deadline, then you'll use a recovery opportunity to get an additional 1-week extension on the programming task. These can stack. If there's one thing, you're knocking the course out, you got everything, you're doing great. But there's one programming task where there's one part of it that you just can't figure out. And no matter what you do, you just can't figure this thing out. You can use multiple recovery opportunities on that one thing. So you could use up to all 4 recovery opportunities on a single task and get a 1 month, basically, a 4-week extension. You could take a lab quiz a total of 6 times if you need it. If there's just one thing that's really bugging you that you just can't get. So these can stack. You can use multiple of them. Once you use all 4, though, where did I even say 4? It's in here. There it is. Once you use all 4, though, if you need a 5th to continue with the course, in a lot of cases, I just give you a 5th one, to be honest. If you're working hard in the course, and especially if we're in the second half of the semester, and you're like, oh man, I'm trying, I'm really trying, and you're coming to office hours and put in the effort, I usually give you a 5th one. I'll just be honest with that. But if you run out of recovery opportunities, and you need another one, by rule, it's F in the class. If this happens in the first half of the semester, I'm usually less lenient because at that point you're just not trying. And I don't want to string you along and then have you fail later in the semester. At that point, I'll cut you off. You can go spend your time doing something else, rethinking your life or whatever you're going to do. A lot of students who fail in the first half of the semester, they're just not trying. There's some people who haven't even showed up today, I'm sure. There are always a good handful of students every semester who just don't do anything. They won't submit a single lecture question. They won't show up to a single lab. They just don't do anything. It's whatever. But if you're trying, I often give at least a 5th opportunity. I'll work with you. The grading is tough. It's stressful. I know that. I'm going to work with you if you're working with me. If you're putting in your 12 hours and I can see that, I'm going to work with you. But just to make sure it's clear, complete all the quizzes, all the interviews, all the programming tests, and then your grade will depend on our application objectives. If you complete all the programming tests, all the quizzes, all the interviews, minus 1 F in the course. You need to complete all of this stuff to pass. If you complete it all, your grade will depend on application objectives. So let's switch gears to the more positive side of things. If you don't complete all the learning objectives, we covered that. But if you complete them all, there's application objectives, which will help you improve your grade. Even if you completely ignore the application objectives and you just do the learning objectives, you're still passing the course, even with 0 application objectives. The learning objectives, that's me and Paul saying, this is what you need to know for this course. If you say, okay, you said I need to know that, I know all that stuff, I did all that stuff, and we say, you fail anyway, that's not fair, that's bullshit. So we're not going to play that game. But you're not going to have a great grade, you're just going to be sitting on a D+ after the learning objectives. The application objectives is where you start climbing this ladder and working your way towards an A or whatever your ultimate goal of the course is. But if your goal is to just pass, just focus on the learning objectives. Though some of the application objectives are pretty much free. If you pass the class, I'll be surprised if anyone gets a D+ in this class. At that point, you're either going to fail or you're going to have a good handful of application objectives just naturally by going through the course. So let's go into how to earn these things. The first 9 programming tasks are all related to learning objectives, and then the content of weeks 11 through 13, there are weekly programming assignments for these weeks, but they are only related to the application objectives. Each one of these 3 assignments will have opportunities for 2 application objectives each, for a total of 6 application objectives on those last 3 weeks of content. The week 14, the last week of class, that's all review. So the last 3 weeks of content. You can earn 6 application objectives on the homework. Those expected deadlines I mentioned, and I just said that's where we expect you to do stuff. I didn't mention any benefit. Here's the benefit, is you can earn application objectives for meeting expected deadlines. One thing I forgot to mention earlier. Your recovery opportunities, you don't have to email me about those at all. If you need a recovery opportunity, it's going to be automatic. It's just automatically used. Your alternative is failing the course, so the assumption is that you're going to use the recovery opportunities. So it'll just be automatic. You'll automatically get a 1-week extension in Autolab, etc. Expected deadlines are also automatic. If you completed the assignment before the expected deadline, I'll go in and update your records and say, yes, you got another expected deadline. It's only for the programming tasks, not for the application objective assignments at the end of the semester. But meet 2 of those deadlines, it's an application objective. 5 of them, that's 2. 7 of them, that's 3. Each of the 6 quizzes on the first and second chance, I mentioned if you don't make any major mistakes, you'll get the learning objective for the quiz. But there's also another tier. If you don't make any minor mistakes, and again, this is subjective, so I have to speak kind of vaguely here. If you don't make any minor mistakes that are pertinent to the material, so for example, you can make like a mathematical error, but if you make an error related to your understanding of inheritance on the inheritance quiz, a mistake related to inheritance, you're not going to get this. You might not even get the learning objective, depending on how serious it is. But if you make just a mathematical error, or you wrote the wrong thing in your print statement, you like put quotes around it when there weren't quotes or something like that. I know they're big on that in 115. I don't care, and Paul doesn't care in 116. But things like that, you can still earn this. But if you do really well, only those minor mistakes that are not related to the content, you'll earn an application objective. You get 2 chances, 1 on the first chance and 1 on the second chance. They're in the application objective. So for example, you show up to the quiz the first chance, you pass the interview, you pass the quiz, but you don't get the application objective on the quiz. Show up next week to the second chance, take just the quiz, and take another shot at that application objective to get that application objective. If 2 chances weren't enough, this is the only time where the final exam comes into play. You can get a 3rd chance at these 6 application objectives on the final exam. If between your first and second chance for each quiz, you completed all 6 of these application objectives, I shouldn't see you at the final exam. There's no reason for you to be there. But if you didn't get all 6 of these and you want to improve your grade, for example, you don't already have an A locked up. If you have an A without all 6 of these, you also shouldn't go to the exam. You can if you want some fun, I guess, if you want to do it for fun, but you shouldn't be there. Then you can show up to the final exam to improve your grade only on these 6 quizzes if you didn't get them on the first 2 attempts, if you didn't get all of them. Other than that, there's no midterm. Optional final, not big on exams. So if you're doing what you're tracking throughout the whole course, you don't have to be big on exams either. And you can start your break early. Our exam is on Friday of finals week too, so you probably will actually be starting your break early. It's probably your last exam. And then finally, lecture questions. We'll have an easy multiple choice question each time. If you answer at least 60% of them correct, which I think is a pretty low bar, you'll get an application objective, at least 80% of them correct, 2 application objectives. Like I said earlier, the questions are meant to be easy. They're not meant to grill you. They'll be submitted on Autolab. I'm not big on Top Hat. I think it's weird to have you pay to take a course. So they'll be submitted on Autolab, and they'll just be simple multiple choice questions that we try to make not as easy as we can, but pretty easy. To the degree where if you were here and conscious, you should be able to get them correct. That's our bar when writing those questions. And the last thing, got to talk about AI. I used to have a big long speech. I would spend like half of the day 1 on AI. Now I'm going to spend like 2 minutes on it. But there are a few key points that I want to highlight. There are 500 students in the class, and if any 2 submissions are across all 5 sections. If any 2 submissions are sufficiently similar to the point where Paul and I think that cheating occurred, both students are in violation, both students get an F in the course. There are 5 sections, 500 students. The reason I mention that is we're not checking every pair of submissions. We have automated tools that check that for us, flag the most egregious ones, and we manually review those ones and make a final decision after that. So don't think you're just going to fall through the cracks or anything. The software helps us out. And both students will be in violation. In my opinion, if you're giving your solution to someone else, and you can disagree with this if you want, I think that's a worse violation than the person receiving the solutions. If you're enabling that behavior, you're letting somebody cheat off of you, I think that's much worse. You're still going to get the same punishment. It's still just an F, I guess. But I think that's worse. You will both get an F. So don't say, oh, I just gave my code to my friend. I think that's even worse. And the last thing, this is the most common type of violation. is writing code with another student. I'll have students who at least claim to not know that they violated the AI policy, is they'll be sitting next to each other, usually in office hours, to the point where they can see each other's screens, and they'll be working on the assignment together, and by the time they submit the code, they have almost identical code, just because they were kind of getting the parts of the solution from each other as they were working, or asking each other, hey, how'd you solve this part? And they set up their loops the same exact way. There's some similarities where we know they work together. That's still a violation. I don't care if you did it in good faith. If you can see each other's code, you're in violation. But if you can talk about abstract solutions, as long as you're not sharing code at any level, even if it isn't literally sharing code, even if you're just working together. See y'all Wednesday.